Hey, good morning, people. Good to be back. Hey, Andrew. Good to see you again.
Greetings, everyone. Good morning, good evening, whatever time may happen to be, wherever you are.
Yeah, one of the challenges and one of the surprises of broadcasting in English, of having this conversation in English, is that we're expanding our audience, hopefully beyond the borders of Romania. And if you're listening to us from outside of Romania, from a different time zone, feel free to let us know in a comment. It's good to be back. We're trying something different from what we did last week on Spaces on Twitter, mostly because we had audio issues, and we think it's important to have a clear voice, not only in terms of what we're saying, in terms of the topics of conversation and the truth we're trying to share with people listening to us, but also technically. So this episode will be streamed on multiple platforms, but especially on Twitter as a replacement for Spaces. In the near future, we'll try to figure out a way to continue having conversation on Spaces. It remains to be seen how we can do that properly. If anybody has any ideas how we could stream from other platform on Twitter, please let us know. Andrew, good to be back on 1776 on multiple platforms, as I said. Today we're having a conversation on the current things as we see them from our perspective, that maybe some of our listeners are familiar with. I keep trying to say viewers. I have to keep reminding myself we're not.
Well, we still have some video going on here, so I think we're good.
Uh, our lovely mugs for our
Yeah.
viewers. You aptly suggested a nice title for this episode, "Cloudy with a Chance of War." But before we start, let's remind our listeners that this is a conversation, a friendly conversation, a conversation among between friends, among friends. If other people want to care to join in to bring their ideas, we're more than happy to have them over. It's a conversation from our perspective on the things that are happening nowadays and what their effect is on our life. Many things are happening. It's not only that it seems more things are happening, it's the fact that we're so connected on all these platforms. We're finding out about everything from the remotest areas of the Pacific Islands to smallest and biggest countries in Europe, Asia, all over the world. So there is an overload of information, and what we're trying to do is make sense of what's happening in a way that sticks to our principles, and we're trying to make sense in a way that allows us to move forward um, in a good direction, I'd say. Do you have any particular topic that caught your attention the past few days?
Yeah, well, I've been probably you do this as well. Always thinking about current events and trying to, put two and two together. And obviously, one of the things that gave me thought these days, and actually these past years, was the war in Ukraine and the way it is being managed or fought by both Ukraine and most importantly the Western powers that and even Eastern powers like Romania or Poland that decided to chip in and help. And when you started, when we prepared this stream, you mentioned, we're trying to find a title, and you suggested Clouds of War, and I said, okay, let's maybe insert some humor into it, and I said, okay, let's go with Cloudy with a Chance of War. And I think this is important because, as I've said previously in other streams, I do think that being a conservative always has to come with at least a bit of positive outlook. Not a blindly positive outlook, but a bit of optimism, if you want. And going back to when I was maybe 7, 8, 10, 11 years old, still living under Ceausescu in Romania, so basically under communist regime. I remember us, my parents, listening to Radio Free Europe in the kitchen. Obviously, we were always concerned to not to pump up the volume too much in case um, the neighbors might actually hear us. But what I do remember, what sticks with me a lot, is that we were looking towards the west with this bright-eyed gaze. The west was kind of pristine from our perspective, although it obviously wasn't, because we are human. But from that perspective, the very narrow perspective of living under communism in Romania, the West was really like a shining beacon, and especially the United States, but also the United Kingdom, and even the other countries that are NATO members and EU members. And I think that this is because, in part at least, I mean, not only because we were oppressed and maybe we did see things with too much of a silver lining, but back then, I think that the Western nations, America, the European nations, um, and the respective institutions projected a side, a sort of light, a sort of hope, that is that actually seeped through all that, through the cracks in the Berlin Wall and through to us. And I think this is sorely lacking right now. What you saw back then was competence, was good intentions, efficiency. And and I was looking during the ever since the war started in Ukraine, people have been complaining about all sorts of stuff. But one thing you're not allowed to complain about was either the EU or NATO. And I'm of the opinion that sometimes, at least, sacred cows make the best hamburgers. And I was asked why I'm not, more critical of Russia, and I said I'm already critical of Russia. I cannot be any more critical than I already am. And we know what Russia, what Russia does. We know what Russia is capable of, and the problem is where can we effect change as citizens of Romania, as citizens of any other country in Europe, or as American citizens? And it's obvious that whatever we speak, whatever we say of Russia, that's not going to ever change Russia's intentions or the opinions of Russian citizens. On the contrary, we might actually antagonize Russian citizens, like the normal Joe that has nothing, especially against anyone else. And but what we can do, I think, is look at our own institutions and bring some constructive criticism, which is, I think, much needed in order for these institutions to work as they once did, especially NATO. I think it's already clear from my general posts and opinions that I'm not a big fan of the EU, especially not of the EU in its current form. But I am a big fan of NATO, and I would like to see NATO working great. And again, coming and addressing those who say, who criticize me or others for criticizing NATO, I would like to remind you that we live in so-called liberal democracies. Or if you live in a liberal democracy and you don't expect institutions to be criticized uh, by the people that pay for those institutions, you are really in the wrong part of the world. This is one of the main things in the main advantages we have now in a civilized world, in the world that calls itself free, is that we can level some and bring some criticism. Again, I'm not saying we should just criticize for the sake of criticism. The criticism has to be constructive. It has to be on point. So that said, I was looking, at the way some communications came out, not directly of NATO, but of people connected with NATO, um, and I'm a bit confounded because we've seen a series of statements where a few generals have said that we should expect Russia to attack, the meaning the attack NATO. And we were given different timeframes, very different timeframes, anyway, from this December to 2044, I think, because it was the longest, estimate was 20 years. Then I don't think that is helping at all. I think that especially today, when people are so easily drawn into um, a lot of maybe useless conversations, and there is a lot of contradictory information circulating everywhere. I think that any and every Western institution should be communicating effectively and choosing their words very carefully. So that's one thing. Before coming, in front of the population and making estimates, maybe they should have sat down and decide, what is a general estimate that they could all agree on, because we are already living in a time of very uncertain times, especially economically, and that's we don't need any added layers of confusion. So we need clear information.
Do you
And the
think
second
this
thing,
is
yeah,
the do you think this is the result of the constant desire to be relevant in the public sphere, where in this age where everybody wants to be on the front page of newspapers, to be invited at the TV shows with highest ratings, and I think in a way this encourages people, even in the highest positions of power, to come up with not necessarily outrageous ideas, because a war with Russia is a it has been for 100 years a potential development, but they come up with ideas that in their eyes make them seem interesting. It makes them pop on the world stage of ideas. And to me, it seems that the temptation for to become, let's say, fashionable in the news has pushed many important figures, as you mentioned, high-ranking generals, to come up with ideas that are not necessarily helping, or sometimes they are harming the public conversation, but at least it raises their status with the media for a few days, a few months, and who knows, maybe even props them for future
yeah.
political.
Well, then we have a problem, because I would expect a general, especially one that's in its high echelons of NATO or his own country. I would expect him to know the value of population morale, of population support, and of communicating effectively. I mean, if these guys, and again, I'm not ascribing to them. I'm not saying I don't know. I don't know their intentions. I don't know why they did this. Okay, so I'm not making any speculation in that regard. But what I'm saying is that I would expect a set of certain decorum coming from these guys. Not, well, you all got to get, prepared to join the army now, because whoops, we're gonna have a war. And this goes to my second point, where we've been told in Europe, and the United States makes a separate case, but in Europe we've been told, you should all, just give us your guns. We got your protection figured out. And in truth, this would be, and I'm, as a fan of minimal state, I would agree that yeah, the state should deal with the army and the judiciary and external relations. But they came over. They said, we got this figured out. Just, pay your taxes. We're gonna take care of it. And now we're inside a crisis, and I can't help but look back at a pandemic, where the attitude of the authorities was pretty much the same, where this thing took us by surprise. We didn't expect this, although it was obviously expected, and this goes doubly true for Russia's aggression. So how how did you not expect this? How did you, we're in this situation right now where it seems like, NATO is kind of running out of artillery shells and maybe other material as well. We should have been prepared for that. We had ample, warnings about this, at least going a decade earlier, if not back to 2008. So to right now come and tell people, well, you have to prepare to do X and that, and maybe even go fight yourselves. I mean, obviously, if our countries are going to, God forbid, be attacked, we're going to try and defend them, but as best as we can. I mean, it's not like we would refuse to do that. But the question is that what I'm coming to basically is that NATO should protect, this sense of security, this sense of certainty, the sense of, we got this handled, guys, we're doing it. And and they're actually doing stuff, but it looks to me like, at least from a communication perspective, they're sorely lacking. So whoever's handling communication for NATO, and even for X and Y journalists, they should look into it and stop, sending mixed messages or wild estimates. Because again, it's people will be arranging their affairs completely differently if the war is coming in, again, God forbid, in December, or 20 years later, or in 8 years later. So yeah, I this is probably my but and I think it's relevant from a way of um, policy approach, because it looks to me like right now, the most countries approach policy from, um, from this collective perspective, where we all must do something, although we all chipped in to, with money and whatever effort we could do for these institutions to function properly. And one more thing, one more point I'd like to make, it's about Trump. And I'm not going to mention here, I probably discussed with 5 or 10 people this week alone about Trump's contribution to the to actually to the anti-Russia effort, and the ways he actually paved the way for a good defense against Russia. So I'm not going to go through that again here. But let's go with the, the wild idea. Let's go with the wild idea, the supposition, okay, that Trump was not, it's not, he's not Putin's puppet, but maybe he just cares about the United States. I mean, what's wrong about that? But whatever. And he wants to not be so cozy to NATO anymore. Let's suppose that happens. Let's suppose that is the case. What do you do as a European politician? Do you try to diplomatically approach him and try to see how can you convince the guy that it's not only in the interest of Europe, but it's in the interest of the United States to be a part of this effort? Or you start antagonizing the guy 1 year before he even gets elected? Why do that? Why antagonize him at this point? If you, again, supposing that he would be um, not very keen on helping Europe in a potential conflict with Russia. So why antagonize the guy? Why not reach out? Why not always keep, diplomacy as an option? Because right now, what it looks to me like, the relation between Europe and United States is like one of those relationships where one of the person in the relationship just wants the relationship to end, and just it is just looking for a reasonable excuse to just pull out of the relationship. They're not making any effort whatsoever to understand Trump, to approach Trump. On the contrary, all their efforts seem to be concentrated on antagonizing Trump as much as possible. And that wouldn't even, whatever, okay, whatever, antagonize him, but at least antagonize him using the truth. Okay, don't antagonize him by constantly lying about this supposed, which was already proved, I don't know how many times, that it was wrong. It was a false accusation of Trump being Putin's man or Putin's puppet. So why do this? What is the logic of this? So this is what I'm just to sum it all up. I'm of the position that it's the job of institutions to make sense to their to the people that they're serving. Because once an institution stops making sense, and obviously, again, NATO, I'm pretty sure it works very well in a lot of, especially on the battlefield. But there is this very, this key point where you have to tell the people what are you doing, what are your prospects, what are your projections, and again, project this sense of safety and security and certainty to the people that you're serving. Okay, rant over for now.
I was, as you were talking, I remembered that this morning the UK-based Metro newspaper ran an article citing General Sir Patrick, stating that the United Kingdom should brace for war, and he said that the UK needs a citizen army, hinting at
Yeah,
conscription. And Metro ran with a big title: "Your country will need you to fight Putin." And here we are. I'm going beyond the. I mean, this is clearly a reference to the conscription campaign of 1914, when Lord Kitchener devised that famous slogan that "Your country needs you." Everybody knows the famous
yeah,
poster for conscription. And as you were saying, what's the purpose of this? Does the UK really need a conscription act? Is this propaganda for when such an act will be enacted by the parliament, and they need the citizens to be prepared? So, do the Brits need to prepare themselves in the idea that sometimes in the near future they'll have to just enlist, because basically what we're being told is there is a war ahead, yeah, cloudy, with a chance of war. And here we are telling the people, get ready, because who knows, maybe in a week, in a month, in a year, or in 20 years, as you mentioned, we'll have to go to war. I thought the whole thing with NATO was the whole idea behind NATO was an alliance that would replace national armies with an alliance that first and foremost represents a deterrence against external attacks, and secondly would replace wars with high civilian casualties or I wouldn't say necessarily civilian, but conscripted casualties, with professionals going to war based on very smart intel, based on years of preparation, based on uh, fine working alliance. And it seems to me this the way the media campaign works nowadays, it kind of prepares more the people to be surprised by war, or to be frightened by war, than for them to be prepared in a meaningful way. That would
yeah,
what's the purpose of war?
and again, I cannot help but look at the similarities with the what happened during the pandemic, where again, the media, especially the media, but also the politicians, what they did was they never ever actually prepared or helped the population prepare or weather out those hard times. On the contrary, the news reports, the press conferences, everything else had the contrary effect of frightening people, of agitating people, of making people scared of each other. So it's the same. I think it's the same policy approach. And to those that might start calling us all kind of names like anti-vaccine, or this is not about a vaccine. This is not about any disease. This is about how institutions approach policies, and how increasingly the West seems to be holding a hammer and looking at everything as if it were a nail. That's the problem. There is no it's only also always this collective thing. Yeah, it's about framing. Zero is saying it's so it's always this framing, all this the same kind of policy, the same kind of collective action that is needed. There is no individual action. There is no independent action. There is no agency. And again, the problem is that the way these things are reported and the way these things are approached from a policy perspective is, to me, it looks at least counterproductive, in that it just scares people. It makes people unsure of their future. And you, in both situations, whether you have any crisis, in any crisis, you need people, you need high morale. You don't need to sap people's morale even more than it already is.
And on the other hand, you have this whole debate about how Trump kept pushing for larger spendings from the European members on their NATO pledge to spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense.
Yeah.
And you had this whole conversation, and especially in the Romanian press, we've seen recently, again, the press is trying to achieve a certain type of fear by coming up with this idea that if Trump wins the 2024 election, he'll take America out of NATO, and
Which is a
then
damn lie.
yeah. I mean, he used those threats specifically, and he mentioned that. By the way, this threat was used by President Obama as well in 2015 or 16, just months before leaving the office. He said the same thing. We're tired of you freeloaders, referring to the European countries that are not meeting their goal when it comes to military spending. So going back to what the media is trying to say here is, oh, we need to be prepared for war. Isn't that what Trump said? Isn't that what the whole concept of NATO is? We
Yeah.
need to always be ready with our spending, with our upgrades, military upgrades, technological upgrades. We need to always have an alliance that works. And what we've seen in recent years, especially in the European Union, we've seen so many points of contention. We've seen the Brussels bureaucrats antagonizing some of the member states. And I'm not going here into the discussion about what kind of leader, let's say, Viktor Orban or the Slovakian government is, or the Polish government is, or the Romanian one even. We're talking here about if you want to have a European Union, united, if you want to have a working defense alliance, or the treaty as NATO is, you need unity. And you cannot achieve unity when you have the bureaucrats always antagonizing, lambasting the certain countries, and then expecting them to go to war with you, or to not take a step back and analyze things from I'd say, more cautious perspective. And the same goes for the United States. When you see time and time again that you spend 3.54% of your GDP on defense, and we're talking about huge GDP, trillions and trillions of dollars in the case of the United States, and then you look to your allies in Europe, and the ones that are always pretending or saying that they are under threat. And yes, proximity to Russia, to a very belligerent Russia that has a long history of aggression towards former members of the Soviet Union. I do understand there is a certain fear in the European population. But if that's the case, why don't you do your part? And if I am, as a member, as a citizen of Romania, as a citizen of NATO member, as a citizen of a EU member, who am I to go tell Russia, hey, you're the bad guys? Oh,
You can tell
they
them.
are. Yeah,
No, go ahead and tell them.
but how will that help me?
No, it's not going to help
My
anyone.
point
That's
is,
the thing.
yeah, I need to tell this to the people that are running my government, to the people that are running the
Yeah.
bureaucrats in the EU. Hey, you're not doing your job. You're not doing your job. And how do I know that? Because here are generals, NATO generals, either for the purpose of being famous for a day in the newspaper, or for whatever other reasons, saying, hey, by the way, guys, we have this NATO thing, but in the end, we'll need you to fight Putin.
Yeah.
How is this different from what we've seen in Ukraine, with the country having to resort to conscription on a mass scale? Isn't the purpose of having conversations inside the NATO countries, inside the EU countries, to strengthen the alliance? How
Well,
is
yeah,
us
exactly.
saying, hey, you're not doing your job. Hey, you're poor spending on military. Hey, you're poor Green Deal policies. Hey, you're poor spending on all sorts of programs that woke programs will weaken us in front of an enemy that has clear intentions, has always had clear intentions of fighting wars.
Yeah, I
How,
mean, this is
how is
that's why I started with this. Do your job. You had in the case of NATO, you had NATO. You have one job, and in the case of the EU, and let's remember that there are EU leaders that have these wet dreams about the European army. If you want money for defense, how about, like you said, Jazz? How about not spending the money that you're getting from an already encumbered population? How about not spending those money on daft policies? At least daft, if not downright downright idiotic and harmful policies. So it's the same thing with we Trump warned, everyone warned, but there's a lot of people warning that going the green, on the green path, on the green way, it's going to create a vulnerability for Europe in front of Russia. And even today, you see bureaucrats rambling on and about expanding the Green Deal and giving up diesel and giving up coal and giving up nuclear even. This is our doing. It's and I've said this time and time again, all you know fortresses, any fortress starts to fall from the inside. So it's our job to try and fortify our own institutions with however, whatever suggestions or criticism we might have, because there is nothing we can do about Putin. Okay, Putin is gonna laugh his ass off if he's ever going to hear most of the criticism coming towards him from the West. So what, again, like we said, and to wrap this topic up, yeah, we expect better communication, we expect better plans, we expect our contributions, the taxpayers' contributions to be used properly and not wasted. We expect to, okay, if you want us to go to war, then how about all countries in Europe institute some sort of um, s- a similar legislation for a more liberal gun policy, so people can be prepared. Because we had this guy from NATO, keep forgetting his name, who said, he came on TV and or YouTube or whatever. He said this thing, yeah, you guys should have, in case of war, you should have, like, a flashlight, some water, and batteries, or a radio. It's like, duh. Well, obviously, those are things that you would need, but this is how long are you going to survive with that? Really, it's either NATO takes care of all of us, and as hope and as it did up to this point, and as I still think it can do, or we just change all policies, we institute free militias in all countries, and we can try and defend our stuff. Although we're in some ways we're past that historical point, um, although it's still relevant. But yeah, I mean, this, as far as I concerned, this is an appeal to, and I think uh, people, NGOs and media and institutions would better listen to people and take care and to communicate properly, spend the money properly, and generally project a more secure and a more confident outlook to people, because otherwise people are going to get demoralized, and you can't fight anything, you can't face any crisis with a demoralized population.
On that note, I would like to switch a bit the conversation to
Sure.
something that is relevant to the previous subject. This idea, what's the purpose of the media? What's the purpose of people informing us? And it seems to me that so much of the media nowadays fails to listen to what the public is saying, to what the public is telling them. Hey, we need to hear this. We need to be informed. We don't need brainwashing. We don't need woke propaganda. We need to hear the news first and foremost, and then your opinions. If we look back to 20, even 20 years ago, or we could go even further back, 50 years ago, the whole idea, the whole concept of news was people finding out what's happening. With the advent of the internet, when nowadays everybody can just 2 clicks away and find out what's happening as I mentioned earlier, on any corner of the world, it seems more and more of the media is preoccupied with giving every piece of news a spin, an interesting spin, creating fear, division, because that's what sells. And time again in the recent years, the public kept saying back to the media, hey, we had enough of this. We want the news. We want the reality. We want to know when and where did Putin attack. We want to know when and how our money is spent. We want to know what are the policies, what are the enacted policies effects on our life. Yet the media keeps saying no, and we end up with videos like the one Taylor Lorenz posted on X yesterday, I think, complaining that we are in danger because so many newspapers and media outlets are being closed. And for those who do not follow Taylor Lorenz, she's a journalist, worked for, let's say, all the big names like New York Times and the Daily Beast, and I think she's currently with the Washington Post. And in her video, she decries the state of the media, but not in terms of what the media does, but the fact that so many media outlets have to close, had to close in the recent years. And her whole thing starts from a Forbes article from last late December, which mentioned that over 20,000 jobs have been slashed in media companies in 2023 alone. And this comes on the back of the 30,000 media jobs that have been slashed during the COVID pandemic. So, what Taylor Lorenz is saying, hey, we're having a problem, we're in a crisis because guess what? Uh, Real journalists are out of work. And the weird thing is that these people never ask themselves the question, hey, could this be because people are tired of buying our shit? Is it because our ratings? By the way, is this a PG 13? Can we
I
use?
don't think it is. If it is, we're gonna just bleep you out and re-upload the thing. But I think we
Okay.
should be good.
Um, have they ever considered that maybe the fact that their ratings are so low that even woke advertisers have stopped paying them money for audiences that are not there anymore? And funny enough, the question is always no. It's somebody else's fault. In this case, what Taylor Lorenz is suggesting is that propaganda has pushed all these decent and hardworking journalists and media outlets on the brink, because people are so in love with stupid social media people like us. And yeah, it might sound like this is a personal beef I have with mainstream media, and it is a personal beef. And if anybody that follows me on social media knows that most of my texts are about how the media disinforms us while pretending they hold the truth. And it's so easy to look at how things are being twisted around. And it was so funny. I think yesterday, slightly to the left journalist from Romania, Cristi Pantasi, posted a long article about how woke ideology and how woke policies are ruining Europe. And all of a sudden, you have all these mainstream journalists lambasting him and name calling him. Because guess what? people in the media do not want to be told not only that they are wrong, but they are the baddies. The
Yeah,
famous, are we the baddies now?
I mean, nobody likes that. And the problem is that guys like Pantazzi, they knew about this. It's not like they haven't heard of the phenomenon. It's not like there is something new. It's only that they, I mean, at least from what I know from Romania, he's the only one that actually did say something about this. Although, I mean, okay, I'm not going to get into this, but at least he did do something. But he can't say he wasn't warned. It's like with Russia. It's like with the you can't say you didn't see this coming because he was warned. People told him and others like him that this will be coming. I mean, it's obviously better late than never. But on the other hand, I would like to see these guys that now complain about the woke wave. I would like and about the again the daft policies of the European Union, and not only I would like to see them kind of coming back and apologizing. Say, yeah, you were right. Can we maybe start discussing again? And if you're right about that, maybe you're also right about Trump, and I was wrong. So some humility would really help. I mean, it's a good sign. It's a good sign that finally, a Romanian journalist decided to slightly open his eyes and because he's obviously just scratching the surface right now. And I really hope he continues scratching and then digging. And this is just not, like a transitory moment.
The whole thing with what Taylor Lorenz is saying and with what Christy Pantazzi was mentioning is that we finally see there is a fight ensuing inside the mainstream media where the people that have for so long played the tune written by ideologues and by politicians are finally realizing that they are harming themselves. And some of them are blaming others, but some of them are realizing, hey, maybe we contributed to this. Maybe we are at fault here. But the whole point is that the media, time and time again, shows itself to not be a reliable source of truth, but mostly propaganda. And this is relevant for every conversations we're having, every conversation we're having, regardless of the topic. Even if we're
Yeah,
talking about Russia,
it's
about
it's
China, about we
it's a
have to.
continuation. It's a continuation of what we were just discussing. The media, just like the other institutions that are crucial to a free state, should have projected, morality, confidence, not antagonize people. Because all they did was antagonize people, play lip service to this and that, and be in the service on this and that ideology. So again, it's an institutional matter, and it's about the decay of institutions in the West, and whether we I mean, not necessarily the two of us, but we as a public, if we can put a stop to that. And I think most of the work right now has to be done by exactly by these guys who are hopefully coming to some sort of realization right now that they've been in the wrong, and that they've been really backing the wrong horse all this time, despite the numerous warnings they had from all quarters.
On the other hand, we have to realize in our conversations, in our private conversation with friends and acquaintances and colleagues, that most people are relying on what they see in the media, on what they consume every day through all these channels, be them established media outlets or social media. We have to assume that these people, unless they're willing to have a conversation about how propaganda looks, about how disinformation looks, about how ideology has permeated every channel of media nowadays, we have to assume that these people are not informed. And I'm saying this because so many of the conversations we're having are in our bubbles. Yet every time there's a clash of bubbles, we see that people are not ready to listen to the facts. What they are willing to do first and foremost is recite their uh, ideological creed, recite their bubbles, tropes. They're not there to have a meaningful conversation. And here's a suggestion that I have: whenever you're having a conversation with someone, ask them from the get-go, what's your goal in this? Why are you telling me these things? What do you think is the purpose of the information you're giving me? And I'm going back to what you were saying about Russia and about the generals and about how the media communicates. What is the purpose of that piece of news? What are you trying to gain from it? And we stated here clearly, we want to see NATO prevailing. We want to see Europe being a solid, unified, unified in terms of freedom, not unified in terms of bureaucrats leading a unified piece of land. That's our goal. Ask your friends, ask the people we're
We
having
want to see
conversations
it.
with.
We want to see it unified, not centralized. It's a
Exactly, exactly.
big difference. It's a very big difference. We can all be united, and we can still maintain our sovereignty. And I would, sorry for interrupting you here, but I just
No
saw
problem.
today someone, like a Romanian economist whom I used to like and I don't like anymore. I'm not gonna say his name. Um, Conflating sovereignty with statism and no sovereignty, you can have sovereignty and you can have free markets. On the contrary, it's sovereignty which starts with the individual, with the sovereignty of every single individual. So it's that sovereignty that actually leads to free markets, where you have free individuals, where you have free agents able to trade free and to exchange ideas freely. So sovereign individuals, that's the starting point towards a free market of ideas, towards freedom, towards a civilized society.
Going back to what I was saying, ask your friends, ask the people you're engaging with, what's the purpose? What's the end goal? And if people cannot clearly state what their goal is, it might be that they're ill-informed. It might be they have their own desire is just to feel superior. We're all tempted to do that. I have to admit myself. I sometimes engage in conversations just for the sake of showing others how little they know about the topic,
Yeah,
or how little.
it's that thing that like that meme where I propose to myself to be less condescending, and then you say condescending means talking down to people.
Exactly. Did you just call me a meme, a
Yeah.
walking meme? Yeah. Uh, Again, when we're having these conversations, when we have to think, where do people get their informations? And I'm not saying people should be informed by listening to just to us. I'm saying people should assume that the media is not their friend. And this goes for whatever outlet, be it Fox News or be it CNN or be it MSNBC or Hot News in Romania or DigiDoshpat or whatever. And we once we assume that, I think our conversations might start to be more honest. When we assume that, when we ask those questions before just assuming everything about our opponent, we might end up being more honest with ourselves, and then we can have more honest conversations. Because I
Yeah.
think too much of the, yeah,
Gabriel in the comments. Yeah, he makes a good point. Journalists, I wouldn't say all, but sadly, quite a lot of them, maybe most of them, are they're into propaganda. It's not that they're ignorant, or if it's ignorance, it's willing ignorance. Okay, it's they prefer. Okay, they prefer to uh, this state of ignorance, because again, it's not. We were coming back to the discussion that we had last week. It's not like they don't know. It's not like they don't have access to the same information that we have. That's the problem. I mean, when I see today people in our local television stations and even outside, talking about Trump being a menace to NATO, and when again, this guy, okay, he continued to increase the funding for the European Deterrence Initiative. Okay, he approved the weapons sale to Ukraine. He sanctioned Nord Stream 2. He opened, the U.S. trade of LNG gas to Europe, and yet they say this. So you know this, I know this, a lot of people know this. You can tell me that a guy who's paid probably tens of thousands of euros a month to just do journalism, who's editor in chief, you can't say he doesn't know. He has people gathering information for him. This is his job. Again, it's their only job to properly, to correctly and honestly inform the population. So again, it's not about that they're ignorant, sadly.
Gabriel says journalists are propagandists. They are not ignorant. I beg to differ here. From my interactions with both journalists and politicians and influencers, there's a high degree of ignorance there. And without sounding condescending, uh, which uh, which means
Talk to
feel
people.
superior, to talk to talk from your high horse. I know how much research goes in any article I write, and when I see journalists writing 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 posts on social media every day, and they also have big articles in big media outlets, and when they have TV appearances, and at the end of the year they publish a book, and so on and so forth. And I remember how much information do I have to parse in order to write a decently sized article on any topic. I can safely assume that those people are ignorant. And I remember an episode. It was like, I think it was prior to the 2019 elections in Romania, when I had the, I want to say the privilege, when I had the occasion, the misfortune of a conversation with one of the candidates for that election. It was at the dinner organized by somebody else, and I happened to be there. And we were having a conversation, and this guy asked me, "Oh, how come you know so much about that topic? Are you in that specific field?" I'm not going to give too many details, and I'm like, "No, but I can read." And this guy was talking about international policies, and in my head, I was thinking, this guy wants to be the president. It was clear he would not be the president. It was clear he was not capable to amass that many votes. But when you set yourself out to become the president of a medium sized country like Romania, and you have no idea about such important things from the realm of international policy and politics, how can you live with yourself? How can you wake up in the morning and go try to convince uh, um, people to vote for you if you're not ignorant? And the same goes for all the journalists, especially in Romania, that the only thing they do, they go on these big platforms of news, and they translate articles, and they think, yeah, we're right, yeah, we said the truth. Just I encourage you, whenever you meet these guys in public, if they have book launches, or if they have, I don't know, public appearances in public places, and you can have a conversation with them, ask them basic stuff that you know, that you've researched, and find out how ignorant those people are.
Yeah, all I'm saying that there is certainly a level of, again, willing ignorance, is that where they prefer to not investigate any further, because the current status quo, the current positions that they have, hold advantages for some of them, whether it be their jobs or grants or whatever, any other advantage that they might get from it.
On the same topic of ignorance, there is this big scandal in the media world in the U.S., where you have the uh, famous journalist from MSNBC. What's his name? Oh, man, I'm so confused with these Arabic names. That got fired by MSNBC, and now he's trying to pretend that everybody that is not going with his narrative of regarding the Mehdi Hassan. So he's pretending that he's the one delivering the truth when even his own outlet said you're not capable of delivering to our audience what they asked
Yeah.
for, let alone telling the truth. We are always trying to convince ourselves we're not ignorant. We're always trying to convince ourselves we hold the truth, and it's the case with us as well. I know how many long sleepless nights I have thinking about what I read, what I'm writing, trying to know deep inside me if I am telling the truth or I'm just trying to see an angle that would make me or my side look good. Should we move on to a different topic? Because I
Yeah.
don't
Should
know
we
much about
should we move west or east towards? Are we moving? So we're definitely moving towards the United States. The question is that if we are moving through the east and through Texas, and or through the west through Texas, or to the east through to Alaska.
let's go. I think we should go towards Alaska via the Bering Strait because I think that's a very relevant follow up topic on what we just discussed, the topic of disinformation.
Yeah. So I think you wanted to start this topic about Alaska. I have
Uh,
something. I have quite a lot of say
let,
to say about
okay,
it as
let
well.
me let me just go and say that just like we said before, pieces of news are thrown in the public sphere, in the public realm, uh, with a certain purpose. And this information, in order to move the spotlight on something different, is one of the most common goals of these pieces of information. And we had a piece of news circulating recently about how President Putin signed an order that declares the sale of Alaska to the United States illegal, or how was it framed? It was called um, not justified, something on that idea. So it should be reversed. So basically, what the journalists are saying is that Putin is such a revisionist. He's willing to go back 150 years in order to get Alaska back. Now, beyond the whole stupidity of saying such a thing, what person not in their right mind, even a mad person would not do that, knowing what the outcome of that would be. Not even Xi Jinping in China dares to say Taiwan is ours. We're getting it today. Yes, China has declared so long ago that Taiwan is their territory, and we've seen the way they enacted the whole Hong Kong transition from the Brits to
Yeah.
mainland China. But from saying, "Hey, that territory belongs to us," to saying, "Hey, by the way, that's sell 100 was it 1867?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
1867. Yeah.
uh, saying that the selling of Alaska in 1867 by some czar to United States of America was illegal and therefore should be annulled. It sounds so stupid that immediately everybody reading such a piece of news should say, "Come on, come on, this is BS." Yet there were so many journalists running with this based on the fact that for so long they described Putin in such a way that nowadays everybody is willing to believe whatever they want about Putin.
Yeah.
And the big problem with this, from my perspective, is so first and foremost, Putin did not declare this, not because
No.
Putin is not a crazy criminal and maniac with ambitions that clearly go beyond just ruling what is nowadays Russia. It's clearly that Putin is a deranged criminal, and his actions not only starting in February 2022, but going back all the way to his days in the KGB, and ever since he became president, and the way he made sure while Medvedev was president, he was the puppeteer, and the invasion of Georgia and the invasion of
Yeah.
Crimea, and so on and on and on and on. We have proved that Putin is not the kind of guy you would want anywhere around international politics. But from the way the media frames this thing, where Putin wants Alaska back, makes things seem so crazy that we might see, like when you wind the clock and you end up, the spring just paused. The way the media portrays Putin will make it hard for real, honest people to believe when Putin does a real thing. Like,
Yeah, that's the main. It's the whole story with the boy cried wolf,
yeah,
and the problem is that lying about Putin is not helping us; it's helping him.
yep,
That's the problem. And you know, we back when the war started, we had all these censorship of a couple of Russian outlets, I think, or maybe even more in Europe. And I'm okay, do that, sure, because they're obviously propaganda outlets. Okay, but if at the same time, if you continue having reports that are evidently false, I had that document translated. It's granted, it's ambiguous. And probably if it even is his document, really, because all we had is a scan. Either of us, having worked as graphic designer, can produce such a scan. But let's suppose it probably is. Okay, um, it's again, I had it translated. So if I can have it translated, why can't a journalist that again has resources at their disposal to do that kind of translation? Maybe they have their one of their colleagues really knows Russian, and they can, maybe they should have someone that knows, legal Russian to look into it, and come with a come up with a story that actually makes sense. Because obviously you can speculate and infer and say, well, maybe he's got his eye on Alaska, but yeah, I mean, it's how you frame it. It's how you tell a story. Because if you tell a lie about a criminal, and if you tell several lies about that criminal, at some point you might have some people casting doubts on all of your reports. So that's a problem. And I've seen people, there was this post where I had a few brush out with some trolls, when one guy was saying that the Americans were hypocrites, that because they want the Ukrainians to give up some of their land in order for the war to end, but then why are basically they were accusing a double standard. So basically, what they said was, well, if the Ukrainians should part with a part of their territory, why aren't the Americans okay with parting with Alaska? Uh, and the problem is that it's the two situations are so vastly different, historically and legally. First of all, just for a short history lesson, okay, Russia didn't want Alaska back then, back in 1867, or in that period of time, because it was just out of the Crimean War. It was weakened. Alaska was actually posed a vulnerability for Russia from the perspective of the British Navy, and they just happily parted with it. So that's
uh,
first
pe-
difference.
people should remember that the gold rush only started in the last decade of the 1800s. So back then, Russia had no idea how much gold and oil there was in. They had no idea what oil, the potential of oil was, but let alone
Yeah,
see.
I know there were, and I remember this. Just to make a small detour here, just a bit of a trivia thing. I remember reading back when I was a kid, reading a book by Jules Verne. I don't remember which one exactly that was. Sadly, I'll try to remember sometime. Where there's a group of Americans actually meeting a Russian boyar or something, a Russian noble, just exploring the Alaska and the basically the northern part of the American continent. And there's a very nice interaction with it. And then again, you see a similar character in the movie Maverick with Mel Gibson and Jodie Foster and a number of other guys, where there's again this Russian noble that he wants to see the how the Indians live and live the life of the Indians and observe them. And the Indians actually, they all speak English, and he makes them speak, speak in whatever their native languages to make it all more authentic. And there's this great passage where the Indian comes to them and he starts speaking English, and the guy goes, no, talk to me in Indian, talk to me. And the guy goes, go. And the Russians is like, how noble savage.
I think that's Cesar Cascabel, if I'm
Oh yeah,
correct.
yeah, Cesar Cascabel. Yeah, yeah, it's a great book, absolutely great book, even for an adult, I think, especially
Yeah.
for kids. But yeah, I mean, it's so yeah. Coming back to this, it's a completely different situation. Historically, it's a different situation, and legally, because there was this other guy in that conversation. These conversations are interesting. If they were at least, if we could have these conversations in in a meaningful way without considering our the other guy being or girl being the enemy, that'd be great. Because there is this guy and says, look, what's the difference between America buying Alaska from Russia and the Budapest memorandum, where the Ukrainians gave up their nukes and the Russians said, okay, we're not going to bother you. And to me, and that's the thing. To me, it looks. I said, well, this must be something. There's something different there. So I didn't know. I just had a feeling that there was something. A hunch that there was something. There is a difference there. So I just went and investigated for a bit, and I realized that the key difference lies in that what Russia and Alaska had was a treaty, and what Ukraine and Russia had in Budapest was a memorandum. And the difference, the very important difference between them, is that the treaty is legally binding, while a memorandum is not. The memorandum is something like, yeah, it's a declaration of intentions, if you will. I didn't know that. I had to go investigate it because, again, I had a hunch that there was a difference there. Again, this is not to say that Putin is not a criminal. This is not to say that it's okay, for Putin to invade Ukraine. But we have to realistically look at something. And do you have a legal case to fight at, in an international court against Russia? And from this perspective, you don't, because nobody will ever. Because obviously, there's probably a lot of memoranda being signed all over the place. And if those memoranda suddenly became, enforceable as treaties, a lot of countries will probably find themselves in hot water in relation to whatever other countries they might have signed memoranda with. So again, and I was actually glad that guy asked the question, but I would have liked him to look. He was furious at me because I said, look, there is a difference there. It's not the same thing. And again, it's one thing to consider that Russia is doing. It's being aggressive, and that Putin is a criminal. It's a different thing to not differentiate and discern things and use, especially in legal parlance, where a word it's very, every word has a very specific meaning that has very specific consequences.
You were mentioning earlier about how easy it should be for a journalist to just take an article and translate it, especially given their resources. And I beg to differ, and this would not contradict the whole premises of what you were saying earlier, but um, it would go back to what we were saying regarding them being propagandists. You said they have all these resources at hand. I'm afraid what journalists do not have is time, and it doesn't matter that they have access to all these platforms where they can get pristine information or latest news. What it matters is that they have to deliver um, on time propaganda. I'm calling it propaganda because whenever you read, just pick whichever journalist you want, be it from Romania or be it from the United States, the European Union. I don't care from where. Go to their newsfeed, their social media accounts, and check how many topics they touch every day. How can a person that talks about how politicians should not attend public manifestations for like the national the small unification day of Romania, and then talk about the New Hampshire primaries, and then talk about how Romania won't be participating in Eurovision, or and then talk about the mayor of Bucharest, and then talk about LGBT rights, and then on and on and on. How do you think those guys have time to go in depth and read about all those things that you just mentioned
I
about
don't care. They're getting
Alaska?
paid for it. How do we have time to talk about topics? And we all
Well,
have day jobs. We both of us have day jobs, and at the same time, when we research our topics, we take care to, or we don't research. We don't do them. We don't, or just say, look, this is, this appears to be so. We still have to. We are still working on it. We're still researching it. But these guys, this is what they're being paid for. This is what they're doing 9 to 5.
well,
And
that's where
again,
you're
they
wrong.
have.
I think they're paid to push a certain propaganda line, and we've seen
Well,
in
yeah,
recent
but then
years.
but this is this but this does not exonerate them.
Oh, it
And we're
doesn't.
coming
It
back
clearly doesn't.
to what Gabriel said earlier. Okay, they're pushing propaganda. They know they're pushing it, and they elect to stay in that system and to push that propaganda and to continue pushing it, especially in the United States. Because in Romania, okay, we only have like a few outlets. I get it. The life of a journalist is hard, although there are a few a few journalists who stay in their lane and report um, properly on the few topics they cover. We discussed previously in our Romanian edition about the nice ladies at Economedia who seem to be doing a very good job. So it's possible, it's doable. Just stay in your lane, do whatever you can. But again, let's say that the journalists in Romania, at least where the standard of living is still pretty low in comparison to the United States or Europe, and where the media outlets are far and few between. Um, but in the States, they have options. They have these hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of media outlets that they could.
Well, not anymore because they're closing and they're being fired. As I was mentioning before, Medi
Well, that's the
Hasan.
calling of the free market, I think. So that's
Well,
where
yeah, yeah,
the free
and
market actually starts to work.
it was funny because I think last week it was announced that Sports Illustrated, the owner of Sports Illustrated, decided to basically rescind the license of publication for the current owners of current publishers of Sports Illustrated, and it was funny to see how everybody jumped on the bandwagon trying to interpret the news from their perspective. On the one hand, you had all the journalists on the left decrying the death of a publication that was finally moving towards the right direction. On the other hand, on the conservative side, you had people saying, "Get woke, go broke." And I tend to believe that free market has prevailed here again and again. I was remembering what was happening a few months back when Gazeta Sporturilor, the I think the most read sports journal in Romania, got its entire editorial board fired, and everybody was complaining this is an ideological move. No, it was just money talking. It was the owner saying, "Hey, you're moving in the wrong direction and our accounts are hurting. Therefore, bye bye." And again, here you're moving in the woke direction. Bye bye. I think, on the other hand, we need to look at the media as a big monolith that needs to turn back to distributing news, to distributing facts, and offering people verifiable facts, not spins that are sometimes so hard to decode, that sometimes after reading a piece of news you're more confused than you were before reading it.
Yeah,
And
or more irked in my case.
yeah. Well, on the other hand, with so many news outlets declaring their political affiliation, with so many news personalities stating out clearly, and just a small parenthesis, this is my beef with all people looking in the mouths of celebrities. How can you watch a person like, I don't know, Ellen DeGeneres, because now she's fallen out of grace, so now everybody hates Ellen. From everybody loves Ellen, everybody hates Ellen. How can you look in her mouth and pretend she's telling you the truth on political things when her competence is clearly not that few? How can you expect her to tell you the truth when she's friends with the Obamas? How can you expect her to tell you the truth when she has a clear ideological perspective? And this goes the other way, though the cases of celebrities being on the right side are very few. Why would you look at the journalist that has clearly stated they have a partisan choice and expect them to tell you the truth? And if you allow me, I would like to move to a different topic, the one of the New Hampshire primaries, because there we see time and time again people being blinded by propaganda. I don't know how your newsfeed looks nowadays, but I see Romanians living in the United States, I see Americans, I see people all over the world looking at New Hampshire and what's happening in there and putting spins that are so wild, it makes your head hurt. And I was there is this lady that I think she lives in Chicago. She's a Romanian. She keeps popping in the Romanian conversations in Romanian, telling us, trying to explain to us that what happened, the results of New Hampshire primaries are normal. And I'm referring to the fact that 70% of the voters for Nikki Haley, the last remaining candidate against Donald Trump in the primaries, has obtained votes from 70% independents or non-declared on or non-declared voters, meaning only a quarter of her votes were coming from Republicans in the Republican primaries. And this lady was trying to explain to me, just like many other news outlets do, that the New Hampshire primaries are an open primary where everybody can vote. And obviously, that has been the case for a long time. Obviously, that means people from outside the parties will vote in their respective primaries. But the problem is that by simplifying things, by saying it's an open primary, therefore any result is acceptable, that needs to say, hey, do not look. Hey, just take this topic, this result as it is, and that's that. But here's the problem. This is when you look at the way the media portrays the result. When you look at the way the results are panning out, because you have results that are measurable, anybody can check them. Yes, it takes time. It took me quite a long while to see how the results in 2016 looked in terms of registered and non-registered votes. But you have the facts there, and when you check the facts, how can you lie to yourself and tell yourself that, oh yeah, this is not a partisan thing? This is the spin of the media is not a spin; it's the reality. And just a bit of data, so it's relevant. In the primaries in New Hampshire, Trump garnered 54% of the votes, while Nikki Haley managed to gather 43.2% of the votes. So there's about 11%, 11 percentages between them.
Right.
Now, if you look a week back at the Iowa caucus, there Trump had 51% and Haley had 19.
Yeah.
So are you trying to tell me that Trump gained 3% while Haley more than doubled her votes? Does this mean that everybody that voted for somebody else said, okay, we're all in for Haley? When both Vivek Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis, the only two other guys that mattered, both
They
pledged.
ended up endorsing Trump. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're telling me that all the voters on DeSantis and Ramaswamy's side decided, no, 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 our guy says vote Trump, but we're gonna say no, we're going for Haley. And then when you put these kind of spins, it's so easy to see that the purpose is not to actually see what's happening. The purpose is to justify your spin. And it was funny because this lady, and I'm not trying to pick on her, because I mean these are her opinions. Everybody can have opinions, and they can ignore facts. Uh, I've seen this take in the news feed on all platforms. This whole thing where, in fact, the Americans are tired, even the Republicans are tired with Trump, even the Independents are tired with Trump. That's why he's, let's remember last election where that we had primaries in 2016, because 2020 he was the incumbent. Uh, Trump was not winning from the get go. Yeah, he lost Iowa to Ted Cruz, and yeah, he won New Hampshire, but he struggled in the first few steps. And now people are saying when he's clearly the only feasible candidate for the Republicans, much to the chagrin of a lot of conservatives,
Yeah.
diehard conservatives or rhinos. I did state this clearly that he's not my favorite kind of politician. Uh, but when I look at the results, I can truly say that Trump is the better solution. Anyway, you have the media spinning this so much, so much, so much. Yet you have ladies like this one or people like this one that say, no, 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 you don't get it. In fact, the media, no, in fact, the Biden administration, the Democrats would love to have Trump on the ballot in November. And it makes you realize how disinformed people are. And the other day on MSNBC, when they were announcing the results in New Hampshire, um, are you familiar with the Joy Reid show? It's
Vaguely.
yeah.
Vaguely.
Don't get too familiar with it because it might induce vomiting. So you have a panel with so it's Joy Reid, and you have Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes, and you also have another panelist on the show talking about the results of New Hampshire. And there's Stephanie Rule from MSNBC clearly stating, I mean, I quote, um, the Biden White House is happy to let Nikki Haley stay in this fight. Sure, let Donald Trump sink his money into her, sink his attacks against her, because they look at the math and they say she cannot stay in this for a while. She can still stay in this for a while. You have journalists, you have the White House, you have donors, you have all the media personalities on the left endorsing Nikki Haley, and yet somehow common folk are convinced it's not a conspiracy against Trump. It's not independents that votes of the independents against Trump are legitimate. There is no fight to keep him out of the race in November, and it makes me wonder, how do people reach these conclusions and pretend that they are informed?
Again, I think they already chose based on the whatever little information they have, and mostly emotionally, they already chose their camp, and they don't want to hear anything else about anything. I think. I mean, it's the only explanations. But for those people that are say not, they had no ill intention. They're just being blinded.
Then why engage in conversations if you already know what you're gonna say? How do you expect to
I mean,
convince other people when
look,
you don't let yourself be convinced?
you have the time, what should have been the infamous title in the time right after the election, okay, which said the secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. And when you accuse them of being a cabal, they tell you're a conspiracy theorist.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm gonna link the article here in the comments for whoever wants to see it. I'm also going to post it on Twitter because it looks like StreamYard is not allowing to post me direct on Twitter, but I'll be posting it in the comment section for this live stream.
On a side note, but very relevant to this point you're making, during the pandemic, we had all these people saying you should get vaccinated because it's free. The state will pay for it, but it's free. It only costs $2 per vaccine. Everybody should get vaccinated. If you're not doing it, you're a moron, and so on and so forth. We remember the campaign against people being cautious. I'd say just cautious with this. And 3 years, 2 years later, here we have the vaccine manufacturers suing the Romanian state for how many million dollars? Um, is it 28?
You
No,
think?
those no, that's the number I think of the doses. Um, I think Pfizer is suing everybody nowadays.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, good luck with that.
it's 28 million refused COVID
Shots, whatever. Yeah.
shots, around $550 million. So more than $500 million. Yeah, and where are these money coming from? $500 million. Were these money supposed to go to Pfizer from thin air, or because we were told it's free, man? It's free vaccination for everyone. Am I
Yeah.
right?
The famous free stuff, that's coming from money that's being planted by the government in the money farms.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, money for the government, money really do grow on trees. So yeah.
Oh man, should we move to a different topic, or should we
Yeah,
linger
we
on
should.
this?
I'm thinking we should. I mean, we have to talk about Texas and
Sorry,
what.
sorry. Let me. I just remembered on this topic of conspiracies. On nothing is happening behind our backs. Everything is in plain sight, and everybody has access to the information. It was just revealed yesterday that
Yeah, it says right here. Look, the secret history of the shadow campaign. That no, it's right. It's in the light of day. It's that. It's not behind our backs. It's in our faces.
yeah, yesterday the former candidate for the state of Arizona Senate race, Kari Lake, revealed that she was
Yeah, there
blackmailed,
was an
or
attempted bribe, I think, by
yeah, by the GOP, GOP chair, the Republican chair in Arizona. So it would be the equivalent of the chief of the, how would you the president of the local branch of a party in Romania. The guy tried to bribe her to stand down. So a
yeah,
Republican trying to bribe, uh, I
another
assume
Republican.
handsomely, another Republican to stand down for the purpose of Democrats winning easily that election, because we know Arizona is well contested.
Yeah,
And
like I said earlier, like, I keep saying every fortress falls first from the inside. So if it doesn't, the enemy will have a much easier time, tearing down the walls if you have people sapping them from the inside.
mhm. The funny thing is that the media twist is that of course this happens in the between Republicans, and of course Kari Lake is an awful person that threatened the guy, so he had to resign. Nobody's talking about the fact that this would have uh, resulted in the Democrats having a field trip on election day in
Yeah.
Arizona. So it's, I mean, I don't know how can people listen to these people or read this kind of news and not feel that they are being duped, uh, being scammed. It's beyond me.
Well, it is what it is. So let's go to Texas now.
Oh my, clouds
Yeah.
of cloudy with the chance of war.
Yeah, yeah, like I said, I mean, for those people who might not know, although it's pretty much all over Twitter, at least, Texas has decided to ignore um, a decision by the Supreme Court and actually, enforce the southern border and against I think it was like an executive order by Biden, if I'm not mistaken. And this is indeed a bit of a crisis because for I mean you have a state defying not only the president but the Supreme Court, and they're right in and in defying them both this time. And obviously, discussions about a possible civil war sparked again. These discussions have been in this space ever since the pandemic. I'm not sure. I don't think it's gonna happen. Not now, anyway. I think cooler heads will prevail. I also noticed that there were a lot of states that actually sided with Texas on this one. And not only, you could say, oh yeah, it's a crazy Southerners, but there are states that are not in the South that actually um, squarely got on Texas side on this matter. And so far, it looks like the border is being that these states are sending help. The border is being enforced as we speak. It looks like, and that's why I don't think this is going to spark a civil war. Not that it couldn't. I do expect, however, the Democrats to maybe exploit this and turn it into a revived BLM riots from although at this point they probably don't have any interest because that will basically sabotage their own candidate, whoever that ends up to be. Although, again, speaking of the press, they might also put a crazy spin on it and make this Trump's fault in some way or another as well.
Oh, but they already did, and you can see if you look in the Romanian media, because and again, I keep saying this, by looking at what the media writes, you can easily see for whom they are writing, who's the beneficiary, the primary beneficiary of their writing. It's clearly not the truth. It's clearly not their readers being informed. Uh, so the most read online newspaper, I think, in Romania, that would be Hot News .ro, had an
Mm.
article on Tuesday about how the Supreme Court sided with the Biden administration, even though they framed it like this: the Supreme Court has authorized the Biden administration to remove the barbed wire. And first and foremost, it shows whoever Ionuț Bayash from Hot News is, that he has no understanding of how the Supreme Court works in how the three branches of government work in the United States. And then this is the you have the blurb, and then the first thing is the declared supporter of Donald Trump, Governor Abbott. um what's the point about bringing Donald Trump in the first paragraph of the article?
Yeah.
And they're not saying about nothing about the number of immigrants, nothing about the fentanyl overdoses, nothing about the all the Democrat mayors around the U.S. saying we are in a crisis. Nothing about any of these things, just pure reciting of the same propaganda. And The problem with this is that you're saying we're not going towards a civil war, and I would like to add something here. Um, I think, if I remember correctly, it was René Descartes that was describing, that was postulating that if you were to create a mythical creature, a mythical animal, he had this obsession with animals and their soul, and or the lack of therefore. And he was saying, if you were to create a mythical creature, you will end up with a creature that has features of known animals. So
Yeah.
we tend to look in the past and to envisage the future being built from parts of the past. And I think when it comes to the idea of civil war, we tend to think, especially in America, we think about the Civil War of the 1860s. Or if we are to look at modern times, we haven't had civil wars in the West. I think the most recent civil war in the proper West was the one in was it in the one in Greece?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the late 40s. Otherwise, for us, civil war is tribes in some remote African nation or somewhere in East Asia
Yeah.
overthrowing their governments and factions fighting for power. But I think when we talk about civil war in the West, be it in the United States or be it European civil war, because that might end up being the case. I don't see the European Union dissolving voluntarily. Um, I think the civil war will look very different from what we have seen historically. And while civil war might not mean Texans picking up arms and going against the federal government or the other way around, I really hope
I'll most likely expect it, if it ever happens, I will most likely expect it to be the other way around. And that's one of the reasons I don't expect it, because right now, I mean, any federal government or knows that that would be suicide. Because I mean, the first time around, mostly it was, the southern states that actually started it. Uh, but if the federal government does start it, then I think all, if not most, if not all states will not look kindly on that, and may actually end up just throwing out the government altogether. But I mean, it remains to be seen. And it's clear that southern sentiments still remain as they were back in the 80s, 1860s, to some degree. um, and there is a specificity, and there is a difference between the south and north, that's still there, and I think it's good it's still there. um, Sadly, there's a lot of still bad blood, I think, lingering around, and it's not even a proper, sort of bad blood that's it's properly understood from a historical perspective. um but other than that, I think it's a good sign. It's a sign of defiance for the federal government. It's something that should maybe ring a bell. And obviously, judging by the reaction of the several states that support Texas in this matter, I think that the message got where it had to go. So I'm mostly looking at this in a positive light. Really, I think
Oh,
it's
it
something
is
that
encouraging to see the other states chiming in and
and
pledging their
even just
support.
one state, even just one state, standing up and saying, "Look, this is enough. Okay, we endured your centralized idiotic policies for too long, and this has got to stop." So this alone, I think, it's a very good sign. Now, whether it will degenerate, well, again, I think not. But I'm not saying for sure that it will not degenerate. Degenerate. I guess we'll probably have to wait and see.
Oh, I think there are about 15 states at the moment standing with Texas, or at least their government pledging their
Yeah,
support of Texas, and we've seen day after day new states adding to that It was first Oklahoma and Montana and Dakota and I think Missouri and Georgia and Florida, the obvious Republican states. But then you had Utah, and then you had well, Idaho again is very Republican. But the point is that on every topic, there seems to be a chasm
Yeah,
widening.
it is. On the other hand, I still do. You know, people are kind of starting waking up to wake up a little bit,
Hmm.
and I mean, there is a difference from, if you look at the people now and you look at the people in 2017 or 16 or 15, there will be a difference. Back then, we had no idea what we were in for. I mean, we had some inklings, okay, but we didn't know. Even us now, I think that people are starting to um, start thinking for themselves again, and to really look at the things and not just take any bit of news, any bit of information for granted. Things have happened, things have changed. There has been a sort of awakening during the pandemic and in the ensuing years. So I do think that again, people are a bit more woke, in a good sense, if you want,
Hmm.
um, today that they were 5 years ago, for instance, or 6 years ago.
Wide
Um,
awake
wide awake.
population. Should we wrap up this?
Yeah, I think we should
And
wrap it up.
if you allow me a brief conclusion, throughout this conversation, we've heard about how we're being disinformed, how information is used against us, and if I were to encourage our listeners and whoever bumps into this material is, don't let yourself be informed by people that have not gained your trust in a personal way. Just because you liked somebody's ideas on Facebook a few years back, and it's funny for me personally to see that people that have been following me for 10 years for standing against woke ideologies are suddenly against me and posting shit about me just because all of a sudden I'm not playing according to their fear mongering with Russia. uh, if somebody has not gained your trust personally, if you do not know their intentions clearly, do not assume that they have the best intentions when they're offering you information. And that goes for us as well. Because otherwise, we might end up being puppets, being peons in an informational war that does not end well for any of us. And it might sound pessimistic as opposed to what Andrew was saying earlier about trying to be optimistic. I know for one that I've seen so much dissent fermented by the media in the recent years, especially in personal relationships with people that know me personally. Know I would not cheer the invasion of a country. I would not cheer terrorist attacks. I would not cheer for limitation of liberties. Yet they're willing to believe somebody just because they are a journalist at whatever WAPO or Hot News, just because those are the professional, instead of listening to my advice to inform themselves on their own.
Well, on that happy note,
Yeah.
thank you all for being with us. Don't forget to share our content. We're trying to get more people to follow us and engage with us in conversation, especially now, since we started doing this show in English as well, and we slowly, as we clear up some hurdles in our personal lives, we plan to come back in full power, and also start producing or restart producing content in Romanian as well, and also expand on our English content. So
Come
we'll
on, man.
see.
This is easy. All you have to do is translate some article, and there you are. You're a journalist.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we'll see you all next week on Thursday, probably the same hour, 8 or 8:30 Eastern Europe time, 1 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Until then, well, have a nice week, have a great weekend, and yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you next week.
Good night.
Good night.